Okay, I'm going to do a quick introduction on combustion reactions. Now, I've got a few images here of combustion reactions. So when you have methane or CH4 and it reacts with oxygen gas, forming CO2 and H2O, that would be a combustion reaction. And also if you had the reaction between hydrogen and oxygen gas forming water, that's a combustion reaction. Now, most of the time you think combustion reaction, you think about something burning. Um, and that's in general what's happening. You're burning something, but you're burning it in oxygen. Okay. And sometimes it's not that you're really seeing something burn or ignite. It could just simply be reacting with oxygen, forming an oxide. Um, so that's where it can get, I guess, a little more complicated. So you shouldn't always just think that it's, being burnt. Um, so, um, like I said, a combustion reaction is really just a reaction of a substance with oxygen gas, and it can be any type of substance. Um, and so we could have any kind of element react with oxygen gas to form an oxide. So you can have a metal react with oxygen gas and form a metal oxide. So for instance, magnesium reacting with oxygen gas, forming magnesium oxide, or any other metal. Now, a lot of times when a metal reacts with oxygen gas, um, you form some sort of coating on the surface of the metal, um, or it shows up, it looks like rust. Okay, so you can have oxide layers that end up being protective to the metal, whereas others are really degrading the metal. Um, and then let's see, we can have nonmetals react with oxygen gas, and that would form a covalent compound. So, for instance, sulfur could react with oxygen gas, forming sulfur dioxide. But you have to be a little careful with the nonmetals reacting with oxygen gas because it's possible that you have multiple reactions that could occur. Because sulfur dioxide is a stable covalent compound, but you can also form sulfur trioxide. Okay, so depending on the conditions would determine which would form. Um, and it could be that sulfur dioxide is just so much more stable that that's the primary reaction. Okay, whereas when you have a metal react with oxygen gas, you typically have one possible reaction that occurs, and that's because they form an ionic compound, and the ionic compound, the ratio of things is dependent on the charges. Okay, so if it's a metal that can only form one charge, you only get one possible oxide. Okay. If you have a metal that forms multiple charges, then when it reacts with oxygen, it could potentially form multiple products. Okay, so it could form products based on both charges. And so let's say copper can be copper 1 ion and copper 2 ion. So when it reacts with oxygen, you could potentially form copper 1 oxide and you could potentially form copper 2 oxide. So it's possible you get a mixture. It's possible that one of them is going to be way more stable than the other, and it's the primary. Okay, and so predicting which one can be tough. Initially, right now, we wouldn't talk about that. Same with when nonmetals react. You just form an oxide of that substance. Which one depends on more stuff. Okay, but the basic idea is you could have an element and it binds to oxygen, either ionically or covalently. Um, the other kind of major class of combustion reactions is more typically what we think of as a combustion reaction. And so it's when you take a hydrocarbon or even really any organic compound and you react it with oxygen, that's when you have that kind of burning in oxygen most often. And what happens is you form carbon dioxide and water. Okay. Now, most of the time, these reactions occur at a high enough temperature that the water is water vapor. So that's how I have it listed in this reaction. But sometimes you'll see these reactions written where they have it as liquid water. That would be after everything cools down. Okay, but the general idea is you have some carbon and hydrogen containing compound. Okay, it can contain different numbers of carbons and hydrogens depending on which hydrocarbon it is, and it reacts with oxygen gas. And so what happens is that hydrocarbon splits up and the carbon atoms bond to oxygen and the hydrogen atoms bond to oxygen. And so it forms CO2 and H2O. Now you could have a more complicated scenario. You could have to where it doesn't react completely, so you get some carbon monoxide, or you could have other elements in your organic compound that forms then additional products. Okay, but this is the basic type of combustion reaction you would see for a hydrocarbon and for metals and non-metals. Okay, but you should always think oxygen when you're dealing with a combustion reaction, that one of your reactants is oxygen.